The room didn't break into chaos all at once, it cracked in a single moment, sharp as a dropped glass. A billionaire heir in a tailored navy suit leaned back in his chair, smirked at the older black woman standing quietly near the centerpiece display, and said, "Whose maid wandered into the VIP section?" The chandelier hummed overhead, cameras flashed, but the air around her froze, because she didn't flinch, she didn't shrink, she simply folded her hands the way she always did when the world decided to show its teeth. None of them knew her son was already in the room, watching from the edge of the velvet ropes. None of them knew the man in the simple charcoal blazer and unbranded shoes was the one they were trying to impress, a CEO holding the pen to a $700 million partnership. They only saw appearances. And they only saw hers. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. The heir lifted a crystal flute and chuckled louder, as if performing for an invisible audience. Seriously, someone escort her out. This is a closed event. We don't do strays. His mother stood still, posture steady, eyes soft, but the room didn't deserve her softness. A woman from the billionaire family whispered too loudly, "They really let anyone in here now," while adjusting a fur stole that still had its price tag tucked beneath the collar. His mother had dressed carefully, pressed slacks, a burgundy blouse, small gold studs she'd owned for 20 years, but to them, she wasn't a guest, she was an intrusion. A server passing by nearly dropped his tray when he heard it, his eyes widening as he glanced at her face. He recognized her, he had seen her photo during staff orientation, the family member of primary executive partner slide they were told to memorize. He hesitated, breath caught in his throat, but fear of losing his job glued his feet to the carpet. The billionaire matriarch swept in next, face tight, voice colder than the champagne. "Ma'am, this section is for high-level partners only. You're blocking the photo backdrop. Let housekeeping guide you out." Housekeeping. They didn't even pretend to hide the venom. His mother gave the smallest nod, as if absorbing a blow she'd taken too many times in her life. She turned slightly, not to retreat, but to breathe. A habit she taught her son: when they try to shrink you, stand taller inside if you can't do it outside. Across the room, the CEO finally stepped forward, the soft thud of his shoes barely audible over the murmurs spreading like wildfire. His expression didn't shift, not even once. But the room shifted around him, as if it sensed something tightening beneath the surface. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply walked toward the woman they were mistreating, the woman who had built him, fed him, held him through storms money couldn't fix. One of the heirs scoffed, "Sir, can you control your guest?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The temperature in the hall dropped a degree, and for the first time all night, the billionaires looked uncertain, not because they recognized him, but because they recognized the look in his eyes. It was the kind of stillness that comes right before a building power cuts out. And the deal they thought they owned was already slipping from their hands. He reached his mother just as the billionaire heir waved down a passing security staff member with a lazy flick of his wrist, the kind of gesture people use when they believe the world exists to serve them. "Can someone deal with this woman already?" he said, his voice rising with manufactured annoyance as several guests turned to watch. The server who had recognized her earlier stood frozen near the catering table, gripping his tray so tightly his knuckles whitened. His eyes darted to the CEO as if silently begging him to intervene, but the CEO kept his expression unreadable. He needed to see exactly how deep this family's arrogance ran before he moved. The matriarch stepped closer to his mother, her perfume sharp, her posture rigid with entitlement. "Ma'am, we have photographers arriving. This backdrop is for high-level partners who belong here. You are making the images look unbalanced. Please relocate to the service hallway." The word service hit the air like a slap. His mother glanced toward the hallway, not with fear, but with that small tired acceptance she had worn too many times in her life, the kind that said she had endured this tone for decades and had learned to survive it. Quietly. The CEO felt something ancient in him pull tight, the memory of being 9 years old in a grocery store when a clerk accused his mother of using a stolen credit card because people like you do not buy this much in one trip. The memory burned behind his ribs as the present moment echoed it. The heir leaned against the table, swirling the champagne in his glass. Watch. She will play the victim in a moment. They always do. It is practically a strategy. A couple nearby chuckled uncomfortably, the way people do when they want to fit in with power even when the situation feels wrong. The CEO's mother lifted her chin slightly, her voice soft but steady. Young man, I am not here to intrude. I am simply waiting for my son. The matriarch gave a thin smile that was anything but kind. I am certain he will find you outside. Security will guide you. She snapped her fingers at a guard. A sound so sharp and demeaning it made two guests turn their heads sharply. The guard approached with hesitant steps. He did not fully understand the situation, but he understood the hierarchy in this room. Before he could speak, the young server finally stepped forward, voice trembling but determined. Ma'am, I believe she is supposed to be here. The matriarch's head whipped toward him. Excuse me? The server swallowed hard. I saw her photo in the staff briefing. She is registered as a primary family guest for one of the executive partners. The heir scoffed loudly. Impossible. Look at her. The room fell into an uneasy hush. The CEO stepped nearer, his presence steady, his voice calm enough to silence the small cluster around them. Is there a problem here? The matriarch turned toward him with a rehearsed social smile, ready to impress what she assumed was another investor. Sir, we are simply removing an unauthorized guest. The CEO looked directly at his mother, then back at the group, his gaze sharpening into something cold and surgical. Before you continue, he said quietly, I want to hear every word that was said to her. Every single word. The heir laughed, raising his glass. Why? Do you plan to defend her? People like that do not need defending. The server inhaled sharply. The guests shifted uneasily. And the CEO, standing completely still, felt the room's power tilt in his direction for the very first time. The heir scoffed again, but this time the sound did not land the way he expected. It fell flat, swallowed by the rising tension pressing in from every corner of the room. He straightened his jacket, attempting to reclaim control through posture alone, and said with a dismissive flick of his hand, it was simple. We asked her to step aside. She refused. People like her always think the rules do not apply to them. His mother did not bow her head or look away, she simply watched him with the same calm patience she had used his entire life, the same patience she used when teaching him how to stand up straight, how to stay composed, how to survive a world that never wanted to give him grace. The CEO's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. He wanted every mask in the room to drop. The matriarch chimed in sharply, sensing the heir's discomfort and attempting to rescue him. Sir, we are trying to maintain order. She obstructed the VIP pathway and refused instructions. We thought she was part of the staff, so naturally we guided her away from the photography area. The word staff lingered in the air too long, too heavily. The young server who had spoken earlier looked between the CEO and the matriarch with an expression that teetered between fear and moral obligation. That is not what happened, he said, voice cracking under the weight of the eyes snapping toward him. She was not obstructing anything. She was only standing near the table. They called her a maid. They laughed at her. His voice trembled, but he did not step back. The matriarch narrowed her eyes at him. You heard wrong. The server shook his head. No, I did not. The heir rolled his eyes dramatically, stepping closer to the CEO as if proximity might intimidate him. Sir, do not let one emotional staff member confuse the situation. She should not have been in that section. Look at her. It is obvious she does not fit here. His mother inhaled quietly, a controlled, measured breath that seemed to echo through the hall. The CEO took one precise step forward, not aggressive, not rushed, just enough to shift the center of gravity in the room. When you say she does not fit here, he said evenly. What exactly do you mean? The heir smirked. You know exactly what I mean. This event is for people of a certain caliber. People with presence. People who understand luxury and etiquette. He gestured at her outfit with a condescending sweep of his hand. She does not look the part. A ripple of discomfort ran through the room, several guests glanced away, unable to hide the unease that came when cruelty was spoken too plainly. The guard who had been summoned earlier shifted his weight, suddenly unsure if he wanted any part of what was happening. The CEO looked at each person in the circle slowly, deliberately, the way a judge might examine a jury before delivering a verdict. So, he said quietly, you removed her because of how she looked. Because her clothes were not expensive enough for you. Because you decided she was less. The matriarch raised her chin in defiance. We were maintaining standards. His mother finally spoke, her voice soft but incredibly clear. Son, it is all right. I am used to this. The CEO's eyes flicked toward her for just a moment, and in that moment, something enormous, something heavy and old, moved through him. He turned back to the group, voice steady but sharper now, the edge of steel finally emerging. You humiliated a guest in front of 200 people, he said. You belittled her. You called her a maid. You laughed at her. And you did all of that without knowing who she was. The heir snorted. Why would we need to know who she is? The CEO stepped closer, and the shift in energy was immediate. Several people instinctively leaned back. Because she is the reason you are standing here tonight, he said, his tone low enough to make the air vibrate. And the reason everything in this room is about to change. The matriarch blinked, unsure whether she had misheard him. But she had not. The room had begun to tilt. The power had begun to move. And none of them had any idea how close they were to the edge. The matriarch opened her mouth to reply, but the words never formed, because at that exact moment the young server stepped forward again, this time with a steadiness that did not exist in him minutes earlier. His voice did not rise, but it carried weight. Sir, he said to the CEO. I can confirm everything. I heard every word. They told her she did not belong, that she looked like staff, that she was here to take advantage of the event. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, but he did not stop. They mocked her clothes. They mocked her presence. The guard glanced at him, surprised. Guests nearby shifted, their loyalty tilting. Some had come in admiration of the billionaire family, but now their eyes moved to the quiet woman who had been humiliated for simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. The heir scoffed loudly. This is absurd. Now the help is taking sides. What is next? Will the janitor give a testimony too? A few gasps broke through the circle, small but sharp. The server flinched at the insult, but the CEO raised a hand lightly, not to silence him but to steady the moment. Let him finish, the CEO said, his voice calm but commanding enough to make the heir's forced smirk falter. The server swallowed and continued, she was not blocking the entrance. She was not causing any issue. They approached her first. They treated her as if she was beneath them. They did not even ask who she was. The matriarch turned toward him, voice clipped with irritation. You are being dramatic. The server looked directly at her now. No, I am being honest. The shift was small but unmistakable. The room had begun choosing sides, and it was not choosing hers. The CEO's mother touched the server's arm gently, gratitude softening her features. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded once, then stepped back but did not leave. He stayed close, as if guarding a truth that could not be unspoken. The heir scoffed again and muttered, unbelievable. All of this over some woman who clearly walked into a place she should not have been. The CEO turned his head slowly, and for the first time his voice took on an edge, a subtle blade sliding from its sheath. Say it again, he said. The heir blinked. What? Say exactly what you think she is, the CEO repeated. The heir laughed nervously. You are overreacting. We were protecting the integrity of our event. We cannot have random people standing in front of cameras. The CEO stared at him, unblinking. She is not random. The matriarch forced a thin smile meant to diffuse tension, unaware that the moment for diffusing had already passed. Sir, I understand you are upset, but let us not escalate this. We can simply escort her to an appropriate waiting area until her son arrives. The CEO tilted his head slightly. You want to escort her away from this room? Yes, she replied, relieved he seemed to be calming. Just until the actual partner arrives. We do not want more confusion. He nodded once, very slowly. Then you should stay exactly where you are, he said, because I am the partner you are waiting for. The matriarch blinked, her composure cracking for the first time. The heir's smirk evaporated. Several guests gasped outright. But the CEO was not finished. And you, he added, looking directly at the heir, just mocked, insulted, and attempted to remove the mother of the man you were trying to secure a $700 million partnership with. The room exhaled all at once, a collective gasp that washed through the hall like a cold wind. The heir stepped back instinctively. The matriarch's face drained of color. And the server, who had spoken at great personal risk, covered his mouth with both hands, realizing what this moment meant. The CEO stood beside his mother, the air around him shifting into something unshakable. The balance of power had flipped, swift and irreversible. The silence that followed did not feel empty, it felt charged, like a storm pulling every loose thread toward its center. The heir opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, struggling to rearrange his arrogance into something that resembled remorse. But entitlement does not bend easily. Sir, we were misinformed, he stammered, though no one had misinformed him about anything. If someone had told us who she was, we would have handled it differently. The CEO paused before answering, studying him the same way a surgeon studies a wound before deciding where to cut. That is exactly the problem, he said quietly. You needed her identity to decide how much humanity to give her. The matriarch stepped forward, hands slightly raised as if attempting to calm a wild animal she suddenly realized she had provoked. This is a misunderstanding, she insisted. We simply thought she was not part of the guest list. There was confusion with the registration table. It happens at large events. But the server spoke again, his voice more confident now that the truth had been acknowledged. There was no confusion, he said. Her name was on the briefing sheet. It was highlighted. Several guests murmured, the words hit harder because they came from someone with nothing to gain and everything to lose. The guard shifted uneasily, lowering his eyes. Even he knew which side of the moment was collapsing. The CEO looked at his mother and saw the small tremor in her hands, the tremor she tried to hide the same way she had hidden every bruise from life's quiet cruelties. He remembered being 16, watching her be turned away from a boutique because the clerk decided she looked suspicious, and how she had smiled at him afterward as though the shame belonged to the world, not to her. That memory rose like smoke, curling around the edges of the present moment. The heir took a step forward, attempting to reclaim authority. Sir, we have tremendous respect for you, of course, and for your work. But surely you understand that appearances matter at events like this. We have a brand to uphold. We have expectations to meet. The CEO did not blink. And who defined those expectations, he asked. Who decided what belonging looks like? You? The heir faltered. Well, society does. No, the CEO said sharply, the word cutting through the room. People like you do. A hush fell again. The matriarch clasped her hands tightly, forcing a polite smile that looked more like a grimace. Let us not escalate this further. We can offer your mother a private lounge. We can apologize formally and move forward with the partnership. We are all here to celebrate a mutually beneficial deal. The CEO's voice softened in tone but not in impact. You want to move forward, he said, because you are afraid of losing what you were never entitled to. The server's eyes widened, he understood before anyone else did. The heir frowned. What is that supposed to mean? The CEO did not answer him immediately, instead, he addressed his mother with the same gentle patience she had always shown him. Mother, he said, did you want to see the presentation tonight? She gave a faint smile. I only came to support you. He nodded once, then turned back to the room, letting the silence stretch until every eye was locked on him and every heartbeat seemed to sync with his next breath. Then this is the last moment you will spend in this room, he said, his voice low but resolute. Because you do not deserve to stand among people who used their privilege as a weapon. The heir took another step back. The matriarch's breath hitched. A ripple of dread moved across the crowd. The CEO looked at them one by one and said, "You did not just insult a guest. You insulted the woman who raised me. And you did it while asking for my signature on a $700 million deal." The heir's face drained of color. "Sir, surely you are not suggesting," but he was. And the realization swept through the hall like a cold wind, tightening every throat in the room. The CEO finally said the words that tipped the balance for good. "You just destroyed the partnership you were desperate to secure." The room fractured. The deal had begun to die. Elation settled over the billionaire family like a descending curtain as the CEO reached into his inner jacket pocket and tapped his phone once, a gesture so subtle it barely registered to the untrained eye, but the people who understood corporate power recognized it instantly. The matriarch stiffened as if she sensed the shift but could not name it. "Sir," she said carefully, "there is no need to involve anyone else. We can resolve this privately and continue with the evening's agenda." But the CEO was already speaking softly into the phone. "Initiate the oversight protocol. Log everything from the moment my mother entered the venue. Pull security footage and internal communications. I want a full audit within the hour." A clear, calm voice answered on the other end, the voice of someone who knew exactly what that command meant. "Understood. Executing the protocol now. Do you want the legal team on standby?" He glanced at his mother, then at the heir, whose face had begun to redden like a poorly concealed bruise. "Yes," the CEO said. "Stand by and silent until further notice." He ended the call without looking away from the small cluster of people who had mocked the woman who gave him everything. The heir swallowed so hard his throat clicked. "An audit? Sir, that is unnecessary. We can handle this without extremes." The CEO's voice remained even. "Extremes are what you created." The server, still standing off to the side, stared at the CEO with something between awe and disbelief. He had worked enough events to know that wealthy people often promised consequences but rarely delivered them. This was different. This was power shifting in real time. The matriarch clasped her jeweled clutch tightly, forcing a brittle smile. "You must understand," she said, "this event took months to plan. The partnership announcement is the highlight of our fiscal year. Investors are here. Media is here. A misunderstanding like this should not overshadow what we are all trying to build." The CEO stepped forward, and the space around him seemed to narrow, focusing the entire room on each word he released. "What you are trying to build," he said, "is an empire where dignity is optional. Where respect is conditional. Where people who do not fit your image are treated as disposable." The heir let out a strained laugh that broke at the edges. "Come on. Do you really think anyone here cares who she is? We are talking about business. Not feelings. If you let emotions get in the way of a deal this size, you are the one making the mistake." The CEO turned his head slowly, and the temperature in the hall dropped as if an invisible door had opened to a winter night. "Do not mistake my restraint for indifference," he said. "If I acted on emotion, you would already be out of this building." The guard shifted his weight again, then took a small step back. Even he understood that the air had become too sharp to stand in. The matriarch tried again, voice wobbling between apology and self-preservation. "Sir, please. We did not know she was your mother." He exhaled through his nose, a sound controlled but heavy. "You should not have needed to know." His mother touched his arm lightly, the same comforting gesture she had used since he was a boy, and whispered, "Son, you have made your point. Let it go." But this time, he did not. Not fully. He lifted his phone again. The matriarch's eyes widened. "Who are you calling?" He did not answer her. Instead he said into the receiver, "Activate the contract hold. Freeze the transfer documents. Flag the deal as compromised pending executive review." The room reacted in a wave. Gasps. Mutters. A champagne glass clinking against marble as someone's hand shook. The heir lunged forward slightly as if he could physically catch the collapsing deal. Wait, you cannot do that. The announcement is tonight. People are expecting, the CEO cut him off with a single look. What people expect, he said, is accountability. And they are about to see exactly how it works. And with that, the partnership that had been the pride of the billionaire family's year slipped another inch toward its grave. The room's murmurs thickened into a low, vibrating hum as guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether they were witnessing a business dispute, a public reckoning, or the quiet collapse of an empire. The heir attempted to regain composure, straightening his jacket with a jittery tug, but his voice betrayed him when he spoke. Sir, freezing the contract is a drastic action. Let us talk privately. There is no need to humiliate anyone. The CEO's expression did not shift. You humiliated yourselves. The matriarch clasped her hands tightly, as if bracing against the truth finally settling around her. Please, she said, choosing her words with careful precision, let us correct what was said to your mother. We can issue a formal apology, arrange a public statement, restructure the terms if needed. Surely there is a path forward that does not involve destroying the partnership. The CEO examined her with a level, penetrating gaze, the kind that made people feel dissected rather than seen. You want to correct what you said, he replied, but you have not once acknowledged why you said it. A ripple of discomfort moved through the guests, many of whom had witnessed the subtle cruelties of elite circles but rarely saw them illuminated so starkly. The heir stepped forward again, desperate to regain authority, his tone slipping from controlled to condescending. Sir, with all due respect, your mother misinterpreted our intentions. She stood in a restricted area. She did not announce herself. We had no way of knowing she was connected to you. You cannot blame us for that. The CEO tilted his head the slightest degree. Then let me ask you this, he said. If she were white, wearing the same clothes, standing in the same place, would you have reacted the same way? The heir blinked, caught off guard. I do not see race. I was reacting to the CEO cut him off gently, almost kindly. You were reacting to everything. You have been raised to believe about people who look like her. For the first time, the heir fell silent. His lips parted as if he wanted to argue, but he could not form the words. The truth was too plain, too raw, too undeniable. The matriarch stiffened, pride wrestling with fear. We are not prejudiced, she insisted, her voice tight. We run a global organization. We work with diverse partners. We donate to initiatives. You humiliated a black woman tonight, the CEO said, his tone even, in front of 200 witnesses, without hesitation, without restraint, and without the slightest attempt to treat her as human until you learned she was valuable to you. Silence swept the room like a cold wind. His mother looked down for a brief moment, not in shame but in a quiet recognition of how familiar this pattern was, how many times she had endured this script in different rooms, with different faces, wearing different masks of entitlement. The server stepped forward again, his voice steadier than before. Sir, he said, addressing the CEO, I can file a written statement. I will provide everything I heard. It was not just disrespect. It was targeted. The CEO nodded once, a gesture of gratitude that carried more meaning than words. Thank you, he said. You spoke when silence would have protected you. That matters. The heir looked around frantically, searching for support among guests who no longer wanted to be associated with him. Their eyes had shifted away, not out of loyalty to the CEO but out of a growing awareness that they had witnessed something unforgivable. The matriarch tried one last time to salvage control. Let us talk in a private room, she pleaded. We can settle this quietly and avoid unnecessary damage. The CEO lifted his phone again, his voice calm and deliberate. Begin the contract termination review, he said. A sharp inhale swept across the hall, several people pressed hands to their mouths. The heir stepped forward in panic. Sir, you cannot do this. $700 million is on the line. You placed that money on the line, the CEO said, the moment you decided her dignity was negotiable. And with those words, the balance of the room shifted entirely. What had been a negotiation turned into a verdict. and the consequences had already begun to take shape. The announcement hit the room like a physical shock, sending a tremor through the carefully curated elegance of the event. Conversations died mid-sentence, the string quartet faltered, and the soft clinking of glasses sputtered into an uneasy stillness. The heir stared at the CEO as if trying to decipher whether this was a bluff or the beginning of a disaster he could no longer prevent. "Sir, you must reconsider," he said, his voice cracking at the edges. "There are investors here tonight. There are board members. Ending the partnership in front of all these people will ruin us." The CEO did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Actions have consequences," he said. "Tonight, you created yours." The matriarch tried to recover the moment, lifting her chin with a strained attempt at grace. "Let us not be impulsive. This is a $700 million contract. You cannot destroy something this valuable over a misunderstanding." The CEO looked directly at her. "You are correct," he said. "You cannot. But I can." The server stepped forward again, unable to keep silent now that the truth had air to breathe. "It was not a misunderstanding," he said. "They did not treat her poorly because they were confused. They treated her poorly because they thought she had no value." Several guests nodded subtly, confirming what they had witnessed. A woman near the back whispered, "I heard it. I heard every word." A man beside her added, "They laughed at her. It was cruel." The heir spun around as if the witnesses were betraying him personally. "You are all exaggerating. This is dramatic nonsense. People misinterpret things all the time." The CEO stepped closer, the space tightening between them. "You are not being criticized for confusion. You are being criticized for cruelty." The guard, who had earlier approached the CEO's mother under the matriarch's orders, now stepped back entirely and folded his hands behind him as if silently recusing himself from the billionaire family's authority. The CEO turned slightly, addressing the guests rather than the perpetrators. "This partnership was built on a promise of integrity," he said. "On a commitment to create something that uplifted communities instead of exploiting them. That promise cannot coexist with prejudice." The matriarch's mask finally cracked. "Sir, please, you are making a spectacle out of this." "No," the CEO said, "you made the spectacle when you humiliated my mother. I am simply showing the cost." His mother touched his wrist gently, her voice soft. "Son, you have done enough." But he shook his head. "Mother, this is not just about us. It is about every person who has been dismissed, diminished, or degraded because someone in power decided their appearance made them unworthy." The heir lunged forward in a last attempt at salvage. "We will double the partnership terms. We will restructure the leadership board. We will issue public apologies. Whatever you want, name it." The CEO's eyes hardened. "You still believe this is a negotiation?" He lifted his phone again. The matriarch's breath hitched audibly. "Who are you calling now?" she demanded. The CEO did not look at her. "Compliance," he said into the receiver. "Proceed with the contract withdrawal. Issue immediate written notice to all attending stakeholders. This partnership is terminated." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. The heir stumbled backward into a table, knocking over a champagne flute. The crash echoed across the marble like a punctuation mark. The CEO continued, his voice steady. "Freeze all joint ventures. Suspend access to shared systems. Revoke collaboration privileges. Prepare for legal disengagement." The matriarch staggered as if the floor had shifted beneath her. "You cannot do this," she whispered. The CEO turned to her with a calm that was more devastating than anger. "I already have." In that moment, the room shifted entirely. Guests who had once orbited the billionaire family instinctively drifted toward the CEO and his mother, forming an unspoken barrier of solidarity. The heir stood motionless, his face drained of color, as the magnitude of the loss settled over him like ash. The partnership had not merely been jeopardized. It had been dismantled, piece by deliberate piece, right before their eyes. The room remained frozen in a stunned hush, the kind that settles only when people realize they have witnessed a moment that cannot be undone. The air stood rigid, as if his body had locked itself in place to keep the truth from sinking any deeper, but truth has a way of moving through the cracks, and it reached him anyway. "This is not fair," he whispered, voice unsteady. "You are punishing us for one mistake." The CEO turned toward him slowly, the weight of his gaze forcing the air to swallow his next excuse. "A mistake is when you step on someone's foot," the CEO said. "A mistake is when you spill a drink. What you did was intentional. What you did was systemic. What you did was something you have probably done to countless people who did not have the power to respond." The matriarch's polished composure crumbled completely now, her breath hitching as she tried to gather the remains of her authority. "Sir, think of the people who depend on this deal. Think of the employees. Think of the families. If you destroy the partnership, you destroy more than us." The CEO shook his head. "I am not destroying anything. I am protecting the integrity of what my company builds. If your employees suffer, it is because of the culture you created, not the accountability you are facing now." A man in a gray suit, one of the attending board members, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir," he began, his tone wobbling between respect and fear, "surely we can discuss this rationally. This partnership has been years in development. Many stakeholders," the CEO cut him off gently but unmistakably. "The stakeholders will receive documentation tonight. Any damage done is a direct result of the behavior exhibited here." His mother, standing beside him with quiet strength, watched the unraveling with the kind of sadness reserved for injustices so familiar they no longer surprise. Her hand brushed his sleeve, just lightly. "Son," she murmured, "let us go home." But the CEO was not finished. Not yet. He turned to the young server who had stood up for her, the server who had risked his livelihood in a room where truth was not always welcomed. "What is your name?" the CEO asked. The server blinked in shock. "Daniel," he answered. "Daniel Ortiz." "Daniel," the CEO said, "you did something tonight most people would not have the courage to do. I want your statement submitted formally. And when this event ends, my assistant will speak with you about a position at our company if you are interested." Daniel's eyes widened, his breath catching in disbelief. The air sputtered at the exchange, outraged but helpless. "You cannot just take our staff." "He is not yours," the CEO replied. "He never was." Gasps echoed. Someone whispered, "Justice." Another murmured, "About time someone said it." The matriarch's voice cracked now, stripped of its earlier confidence. "Please listen," she begged, "we can rebuild trust. We can fix this. Tell us what you want." The CEO looked at her for a long, quiet moment, and when he spoke, it was not loud, but it struck with the precision of a blade. "What I want," he said, "is for you to understand that respect is not something you give only to those who can benefit you. It is something you give because it is right. You showed none of it tonight." The air took a step forward, desperation pulling his voice thin. "What can we do? Tell us what will make this right." The CEO stepped back beside his mother, his presence closing the conversation like a door gently but firmly shut. "Nothing you do," he said, "can undo what has already been done." And with that, the final thread of the partnership snapped, leaving a silence so absolute it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. The weight of the moment hung in the air like a suspended verdict as the CEO guided his mother a step closer to the center of the room. Every eye followed them, not because of spectacle but because the truth had shifted, and everyone present could feel it. The heir stood motionless, his face pale beneath the glow of the chandeliers, his arrogance drained into something brittle and shaking. "Sir," he said again, voice hollow now, "you cannot walk away from this deal. You cannot. There must be something we can offer you." The CEO did not even look at him this time. He rested a gentle hand on his mother's shoulder, steadying her as she adjusted her footing on the polished floor, then turned to the room with a clarity that made the air feel sharper. "You still believe this is about money," he said. "You still believe $700 million is enough to erase what you did. That tells me everything I need to know about the values you hold. The matriarch took a trembling step forward, her voice cracking at the seams of her composure. We did not know who she was, she repeated, as if the words might somehow shield her from accountability if she said them enough times. We had no idea she was connected to you. The CEO turned his head slowly and met her gaze. You should not have needed to know who she was to treat her with respect. Someone in the crowd whispered, that is true, and another murmured agreement. The matriarch's eyes darted nervously toward the guests as she realized the tide had turned far beyond her reach. The CEO lifted his chin. Activate the final clause, he said to no one and everyone at once, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had commanded rooms larger than this, who had built empires from places that once tried to exclude him. He tapped his phone again. Notify our shareholders. The partnership is dissolved. Effective immediately. A chime sounded on his device, confirming execution. The heir stumbled forward, reaching out as though he could physically stop the unraveling. Please, he said, trembling, you are condemning us. You are condemning our entire future. You are condemning everything we have built. The CEO's expression remained perfectly calm. Your future is the result of your choices. Tonight, you made them very clear. His mother looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. Son, let us go home now. You have spoken for all the times you could not speak before. But the CEO had one final truth to deliver. He turned back to the billionaire family, his voice lowering into something colder, something honed by years of watching his mother be treated as if she were less. You wanted to know who she was, he said. You wanted to know why she deserved to stand here. He stepped slightly aside, revealing her fully to the room. This is the woman who worked 3 jobs so I could attend the school you would not let your children apply to. This is the woman who was denied service, denied opportunities, denied dignity, and still taught me to keep my head high. This is the woman who built me. His words echoed across the hall like a solemn bell. And you mocked her. No one dared respond. No one even moved. You wanted to know who she is, he continued, but the real question is who you are. And tonight, you answered that for yourselves. Daniel, the young server, stood silently near the catering station with tears in his eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming recognition of justice being spoken aloud in a place where injustice was usually ignored. The CEO took his mother's hand gently. We are done here, he said softly. Then he looked back at the billionaire family one final time. You called her someone who did not belong, he said. But after tonight, the only people who do not belong in this room are you. And with that, he turned away, guiding his mother toward the exit as the room parted for them in reverent silence. The room remained suspended in stunned silence as the CEO and his mother began walking toward the exit. The guests instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path through what had once been a fortress of wealth and entitlement. The chandeliers above flickered softly, casting long shadows across faces that had, moments earlier, brimmed with arrogance but now sagged under the weight of realization. The heir called out desperately, his voice cracking in a way that betrayed just how deeply the consequences had struck him. Sir, wait. Please. We can rebuild this. We can fix this. There must be something we can do. The CEO did not slow his steps, but he turned his head just enough for the heir to see the finality in his eyes. You spent the night reducing my mother, he said, and now you want me to save you. The matriarch stepped forward, her designer heels clicking unevenly against the polished floor. There was none of the earlier haughtiness in her posture. Instead, she stood with the nervous stiffness of someone who finally understood the magnitude of the storm she had created. We made a mistake, she whispered. We acted on assumptions. We did not show kindness. But please, understand, we have never lost a partnership of this scale. We are begging you to reconsider. The word begging hung in the air with a heaviness that made several guests look away. This was not humility, but desperation dressed in borrowed sincerity. The CEO paused, letting the silence settle around her confession. Then he spoke with a clarity that cut through the room like a clean blade. I do not want an apology because you lost something, he said. I want you to reflect on why you felt entitled to treat her as nothing. Daniel, the young server, stood near the entrance, still processing everything. He had seen powerful people before, but none had wielded their status with such measured discipline, such unshakable conviction. When the CEO and his mother reached him, he straightened instinctively. The CEO nodded at him. "Thank you for your integrity," he said. Daniel swallowed hard. "Sir, I just did what was right." "Doing what is right," the CEO replied, "is what people with real power do. That is what separates leaders from tyrants." Behind them, the heir made one last attempt, stumbling toward them as though he could pull the decision back with his bare hands. "Sir, our shareholders will panic. Our board will collapse. Our valuation will tank. You are condemning us to ruin. Please." The CEO turned fully now, facing him with a calm that was almost unnerving in its steadiness. "You condemned yourselves," he said. "Not tonight, but every time you treated someone as beneath you. Tonight simply revealed what has always been true." The matriarch's voice cracked again. "We can pay damages. We can restructure our team. We can put new policies in place. Tell us what will undo this." "Nothing," the CEO said. "Because this is not about money or policy. It is about character. And character cannot be bought, borrowed, or faked." The guests who had remained silent throughout now exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others shifting uncomfortably as they examined their own complicity in similar moments. The CEO's mother squeezed his hand gently. "Son," she murmured, "you have defended me enough for one night." He shook his head softly. "I did not do this only for you. I did this for anyone who has ever been made to feel small in rooms built to exclude them." The air seemed to thicken with the truth of his words. The billionaire family stood helpless as the CEO turned away for the final time. But the matriarch, clinging to the last shred of hope, took a small step after him. "If you walk out," she said quietly, "you destroy everything we have built." Without turning, the CEO answered, "No. I am destroying the illusion that you built anything on integrity." The lights shimmered across the hall as he and his mother approached the doors. A hush fell so deep it felt like the marble itself was listening. And as the doors opened, letting in a breath of cool night air, the CEO delivered the final line that ended any chance of redemption. "You valued your pride more than her dignity. Now you can live with the cost." Then he stepped into the night, his mother beside him, leaving behind a room that would never forget the moment power changed hands. The night air wrapped around them as the doors closed behind them, soft and cool, carrying none of the venom or arrogance that had tainted the ballroom. The CEO took a slow breath, letting the tension drain from his shoulders as his mother walked beside him, her steps steady but quiet. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hush between them was not empty but full, like the reverence of a completed chapter. The valet attendants straightened instinctively when they saw him, sensing the gravity of whatever had occurred inside. One of them hurried forward to retrieve the car, but the CEO lifted a hand gently. "No rush," he said. "We are not in a hurry tonight." His mother looked up at him, her eyes soft with a mixture of pride and lingering ache. "You did not have to go that far," she said quietly. "I have lived through worse moments than tonight." He turned toward her fully, his expression tender but resolute. "That is exactly why I did it," he replied. "You should not have had to endure it even once." She smiled faintly, shaking her head the way she used to when he was young and determined to shoulder burdens far larger than his small hands could hold. "You have always wanted to protect me," she whispered. "But I never wanted you to become hardened by this world." "I did not become hardened," he said. "I became clear." Behind them, the glass doors of the ballroom were still trembling slightly from the force of the final words he had spoken. Inside, the billionaire family was surrounded by whispers, their empire cracking beneath the weight of a truth they had ignored for too long. The CEO turned his gaze toward the sky, where the city lights glowed like scattered embers across the darkness. "You know," he said softly, "when I was a child, I used to think power was loud. That it was about raising your voice, forcing people to listen, proving yourself." His mother looked at him patiently, waiting. "But tonight," he continued, "I understood what you have been teaching me my entire life. Real power is quiet. Real power is steady. Real power does not need to shout, because it knows exactly what it stands for. She squeezed his hand. And what do you stand for, my son? He met her eyes, and the answer came with the calm certainty of a truth he had carried since childhood. Dignity, he said. Yours. Mine. Anyone who has ever been told they are less. A valet approached nervously. Sir, your car is ready whenever you are. The CEO nodded. Thank you. And take the rest of the night off. Full pay. The young man blinked in surprise. Are you sure? Yes, the CEO said. No one should have to return to a room like that tonight. As they approached the car, Daniel, the server who had risked his job to speak the truth, stepped out from the side entrance, still in his uniform, still looking overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Sir, Daniel called out cautiously, unsure if he was allowed to approach. The CEO gestured for him to come forward. Daniel took a breath. I just wanted to say, thank you. Not for the offer. But for showing them what accountability looks like. The CEO placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You did the brave part, he said. I only finished what you started. Daniel nodded, emotion tightening his throat. I will not forget this night. Good, the CEO said. Carry it with you. Let it guide you. Integrity will take you farther than privilege ever could. Daniel stepped back as the CEO opened the car door for his mother. She paused, looking at him with a quiet strength. I am proud of you, she whispered. For the man you became. For the man you chose to be. He nodded once, breathing in the moment as if imprinting it into his bones. When he finally slid into the driver's seat, he looked ahead, the city unfolding before them, vast and waiting. Mother, he said gently, tonight was not about revenge. It was about restoring what they tried to take from you. And as the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the fractured remnants of the ballroom behind, the CEO spoke the words that would echo long after the night was over. I did not raise my voice tonight. I raised the standard. And the city, humming with the quiet pulse of justice rekindled, seemed to nod in agreement.